Hi, my name's Danielle Blunt. I am a professional dominatrix. I am a yoga teacher. I have my BA in psychology, and I'm really interested in the ways that kink and alternative paths to healing sort of overlap, and some of the ways that folks who engage in BDSM are sort of tapping into different modalities of healing that they may or may not be aware of.
Cool, thanks. I'm Andrea Glik. I'm a psychotherapist. I focus on working with queer and trans and survivor folks, and my practice is very somatically, so body-based oriented, and a lot of my clients find kink and BDSM to be a really safe and inviting and embodied way to re-experience being inside of themselves, so I'm very excited to be here talking more with another side of this perspective.
Yeah, and we've been talking a lot about this sort of on our own, and I feel like it's important to have these conversations in public, and we want to remind people watching, this is just a conversation. We're sort of trying to build a space to make meaning together, and
yes,
I feel like oftentimes our work is so siloed in the psychology world, and folks who are engaging in BDSM or folks who are pursuing alternative modes of healing just don't interact, and there's so many resources and information and similarities between what we do that I think everyone would benefit from sort of hearing and communicating and talking, dialoguing about.
Yeah, absolutely, and that kind of goes back to how healing kink and BDSM can be, and so having therapists and folks who are kinky and pro-doms be kept separate kind of encourages this split between there's healing that you do in therapy, and then there's healing that you do with your sexuality or that you do with your kink, and actually the therapeutic space can be a really great place to process things that folks are doing outside of here.
Yeah,
around that.
Totally. Yeah, and I think the same goes with hiring a pro-dom to pursue that as well. Oftentimes, folks who are working with me on some of that, I encourage to go see kink-friendly therapists, because that's not what my training is, and I think the work in tandem sort of goes really nicely together. And it's something that folks pursue on their own in individual one-on-one BDSM dynamics outside of a professional context too.
Yeah, absolutely. And same goes for me, where I love making referrals to professionals, because my work can only go so far. And I think that's a thing that is misunderstood about therapy, is that the healing only happens in the room, when in fact it's so often, it's 99% outside of the room.
The supportive practices that enable you to progress in all these aspects.
Yes. Yeah, and then therapy can be the place to integrate things that you learn in a BDSM experience, whether it's with a partner or a professional. Yeah.
So what is kink?
Yeah. So for folks who might be new to this, kink is another word for BDSM. So bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, masochism. Yeah, that's it, right? Can't forget the masochism. And that can look like a lot of different things, and we were talking about that before this, how it's any sort of power exchange, which is also present in many relationships.
It's present in so many relationships that aren't talked about, that aren't necessarily defined as kinky, but being aware of the way that power plays out in every relationship that you have can be tremendously helpful.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it's intentional power play and intentional power dynamics. It's also rope and bondage and impact play and age play, 24/7 dynamics or relationships, which are kink dynamics that are happening all the time, which again, we're always in dynamics all the time with people anyways, just more intention there.
And I think of manipulation of body and dynamics.
Ooh, I love that.
To not necessarily to pursue a particular outcome, but to communicate in a different way. With the body and with your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also goes to the more somatic aspect of this, which the other definition is very
body.
Yeah, so this is about the body, right? So to kind of step out of the sex education aspect, right? It is about being embodied, it is about connecting with your body in a new way. It's about connecting with your partners or your partner on a deeper level, and it is about a practice of embodiment, because you do have to be in touch with some aspect of being embodied to be able to engage in this work as a top or a bottom, you want to say what tops and bottoms?
Sure. I feel like I spend so much time in the embodied practice that it oftentimes like becomes
I know.
difficult to talk about it and define it. So work with me here, but
totally.
I would say that I feel like also definitions can be so reductive because it can look so different for different people.
Yes.
But a bottom is someone who's typically like on the, I hate to use the word like receiving because I think it's like sort of like a flow between, so I'm getting a little bit tripped up.
Yeah, so like the person who is more submissive, right, and then the next person is more dominant, and that can look like a lot of things, basically. Yeah. And so when we use these terms, it's like can mean a lot.
Yeah,
and
I get so tripped up because of queer community, like queer definition of top and bottom. Just get
totally. Yes. And so something that is important too is I think that the bottoms experience can get. So the person, quote, receiving or like on the more submissive side can get a lot more play, right, and like talking about what it means to receive, but that what we'll be talking about is anybody engaging in any kind of play.
And I think like a good scene, like there's an energy flow where everyone is receiving something. Yeah, exactly. And we'll get into it later, but like some of the very little hard research that there is on like flow states and BDSM and altered states of consciousness do show that like everyone involved in a scene and even like folks who are witnessing a scene like in community at a party do like have some altered state of consciousness. Yeah. So I think like in that way like it exemplifies in the ways in which everyone is receiving. Yeah. Right. So it's an embodiment practice for anybody involved, whether like you're on either end of things or you're just watching or you're even in the space and you can't see. Like it's we're feeling the energy that's happening. Yeah, I would say the top in a BDSM context is the person either wielding the whip or telling someone how to. There you go. Great. That's perfect. So good. Cool. So what's the nervous system? Yeah. How does it sort of play a role in BDSM? Yeah, totally. So in talking about being embodied, we all have a nervous system inside of us, and the nervous system is the part of our body that interprets stimuli, interprets information, and the part of our nervous system that tells us if something is a cue of danger or a cue of safety. And so the example that I will always give is if someone hears like a car backfire and the next thing they know they're like on the ground, they've had an automatic reaction. Their nervous system interpreted the loud noise, maybe because of a past trauma, as being danger. And so before you can think, because it's actually not safe to think in that moment, you're already like on the ground. And so that is something that is there to protect us. So if we use our thinking brains in a moment we have to make an automatic choice, then it might be too late. And so the nervous system can become sensitized, it can become traumatized. And so returning to the body is about healing the nervous system and being able to interpret certain information as safety when in the past it's maybe been a cue of danger. And so the three main parts that we'll be talking about the nervous system is kind of like a ladder, and this is using the polyvagal theory. So at the top of the ladder you have the ventral vagal, which is about safety and connection. So we're using it right now, right? So we're engaging, we're talking, I'm using my whole face to talk to you all. And then the next state is the sympathetic arousal. So that's the fight or flight response, and it's also just general activation, so being really excited. So like how I was feeling before we started filming, I was like, my heart's kind of racing, I had to pee a couple times, I was like my cheeks are a little pink, right, because I'm like, so the sympathetic can be a really positive thing too. It can be excitement, it can be movement and acceleration, and then kind of at the bottom of the ladder is the dorsal vagal, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, as is the ventral, but they're two separate parts. And I have a chart about this in my post somewhere, and I can post it again. So the dorsal vagal is the submit or freeze response. So it's the response that we have when we have determined that the safest thing to do is to pretend that we don't exist, is to play dead, is to totally submit. And the thing that is really wonderful about the nervous system is that there are safe parts of each of these states. So there's a safe part of the dorsal vagal, which is called low tone dorsal, and I learned that from Irene Lyon, and she's amazing. I recommend everybody check out her stuff.
And so that's how we feel after we have a really big meal, or after we have a really intense orgasm, or get a massage. And so that's a state that can be...
Would that be subspace?
Subspace, yeah, which is how folks who are submissive feel in this, like, dreamy...
altered state of consciousness
altered
after,
state,
or, like,
yes.
during a scene.
Yeah, exactly. So these different states have a survival response, and then they also have ways that we can connect to our bodies within these different places. And so knowing about the nervous system helps us connect inward.
And I think it also gives us, like, I think a lot of my BDSM practice as a form of, we were talking about this, like, hacking consciousness, and, like, a way of reaching altered states of consciousness. And so, by, like, my study of psychology and having conversations like this with Andrea, like, give me more language around some of the things that I've been playing with in sessions and in my personal life.
Cool.
I think that's something that would be interesting, would be if you could just talk really briefly about, like, I think fear can be an arousal of the sympathetic nervous system, and arousal can be an arousal of that too.
Yeah.
And if you can we can talk about, like, how they can look the same in the body and be interpreted differently. I think it might give folks who aren't as familiar with BDSM more of an understanding of the way these things are eroticized.
Yeah, totally. I think I want to hear what you say about that, because the fear part.
I think like the heart beating,
yes,
and like sweating, and like butterflies in your stomach, like that can all happen just like seeing your partner in a really hot outfit.
Yes.
Or it can happen like during like a very triggering.
Yeah.
The same.
Right, and it's so in kink, you're getting to experience sympathetic arousal, extreme sympathetic arousal, right? If you're in a really intense scene, which is just like a container of play with another person, it's called a scene, and you get to experience really high levels of sympathetic arousal as being safe and exciting and consensual, right? Because other times that you felt that way, maybe not consensual.
Right.
And that's one of the core pillars of BDSM is consent, right? And so you are getting to experience being really, really close to the edge of your window of tolerance, which is kind of this like sweet spot that we are when we're able to be connected and present.
Yeah.
And you're getting to experience being really close to the top of it without it being unsafe. Yeah. But I mean, fear can be also very erotic, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you know that everything's actually going to be okay, right? I would love to hear like more about what you
I
think
was just
about
thinking
that.
like of the two sometimes dissonant but also sometimes like overlapping experiences of fear and sexual arousal, and just the ways that they manifest in the body in a similar way. And you're just like, oh, like, am I scared of that, or am I turned on?
Yeah. Right.
And
Totally.
That's sort of what I was thinking.
Yeah. Right. And so that's sort of like the two sides to each state, right? Is the like sympathetic arousal as like excitement, and then also as like fear, which could be erotic and excitement, but could also just be bad, like fear that something truly bad is going to happen. Which again, you can play with that in kink and heal your relationship to like that, like, oh, what's gonna happen, right? Like that's super fun, actually.
Yeah. Let's move into that. That's where we are on that. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Common misconceptions.
Oh yeah, I was skipping ahead because I.
Oh yeah. No. Let's do it. No, let's go there. Yeah. We can go back to that.
Yeah, and like so, we're talking about something that's challenging, is what I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
Sort of talk about, and I don't know if you want to do the path analogy, and then we'll go into.
Yeah. Right. Totally. So other than these, getting to experience your nervous system and these sort of like these states as being safe or exciting during kink, or getting to more deeply connect to your inner experience of fluctuating between feeling aroused sympathetically and also feeling connected with someone, which is also the top of that ladder, is we also get to create new experiences with kink. And so, for example, maybe your kink or the scene that you're doing looks just like your trauma, maybe it looks nothing like your trauma, maybe it is somewhat similar, it doesn't have to be the same narrative, but what you're getting to do is write a new narrative, and not just like through verbal narrative, but also through somatic narrative.
I think the somatic narrative is so interesting because, like, I think a lot the misconception that we're planning on talking about is the idea that BDSM is the recreation of a trauma.
Yeah.
And that's not often the case.
Right.
And I think some people do play with elements of something that is traumatic that happened to them, but oftentimes it's to reach that altered ending and that feeling of, like, support in like allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to sort of like hold you after a scene and coming to a different outcome.
Yeah.
And I think there's something so healing about that. And so on a somatic level, like the narrative might have nothing to do with anything that you've experienced in your life. But the like autonomic nervous system is doing something that is very similar. So the autonomic nervous system might be activated in a similar way, and you're still getting to like come down the ladder into that like cozy flow state. Yeah, in a safe way. This time it's safe. And I would say I'm like so hesitant to use the word safe in my communications. Yes, because I think I guess just safer makes me feel more comfortable because like I as a practitioner never know what makes someone feel safe or what someone's triggers are. And like even if someone like I'll have people tell me what triggers are, and even if they do, sometimes something comes up in a situation, and I found that by like framing the space as a safe space, oftentimes if something comes up, people feel less comfortable talking about it. Yeah. And so BDSM can be a safer space. And it can also go really poorly. Yeah, like therapy. Like therapy, like any relationship, like a massage session or a Reiki session, like when we're working with the body or working with relationships, right? Friendships, like it's risky. It's always risky. And that's the sort of misconception around kink is that it's especially risky, which it can be, but not always, right? And I think, like, the risk is also the risk that you're going to reach a new outcome. And I think that's also terrifying for a lot of people, that you're going to enter into this space of the unknown. And, like, I know, like, that, like, for me is when therapy becomes destabilizing and, like, extra support is needed around that. And it's, like, thinking about massage that I got recently, and I was, like, very triggered in it in a way that I wasn't expecting, and that the massage therapist wasn't expecting. And, like, communicating around that was really complicated because, like, I wasn't expecting what happened to trigger me, and it did. Yeah. And so it was, like, a matter of, like, coming out of it, being like, okay, like, space, like, being able to, like, come down and, like, come together to, like, figure out what happened. Right. Right, and so any somatic work has that risk, or any relationship, because even with a massage therapist, you still have the relationship, too. Right. Has that risk. And that kind of touches on the, like, misconception, but also something that can happen, which is, I saw someone, like, said that in the comments, and also had posted about it earlier, like, what about when kink re-traumatizes you? And that kind of relates back to this, which is that I think because kink, there is a lot of stigma associated with it, and a lot of pathologizing, right, which is the meaning that you want this thing because you were hurt, which is sometimes the case and sometimes not, and we'll never actually know. That's why you like what you like, is your trauma, right? Who hasn't been hurt? Yeah, right. Who hasn't been hurt, totally. Which is that if it's done with the right intentions and it's held correctly, even if there are ruptures or things that happen that feel re-traumatizing, that there's a safe space to be held, and that there's no, in my opinion, there's no larger, like, chance of it happening than getting a deep tissue massage or being in a therapeutic relationship or a friendship or a new date, right? Like, these all have these risks of being re-traumatized. Right. And you can reduce the risks by, like, interviewing folks and, like, negotiating and, like, finding the practitioner that works best for you and, like, learning how to communicate. Yeah. And I know so I've been, like, really interested in having these conversations with therapists to, like, find language for things that are, like, very embodied in my practice. Yeah. And when I was talking to my friend Abigail about transference, the phrase that came up is rupture is inevitable, but repair is possible. Absolutely. And I think, like, that's such a beautiful sentiment. Like, especially when you're pursuing, like, when you're, like, digging, like, deep into your psyche, like, whether, like, on, like, a therapist's couch or, like, in, like, your mistress's, like, play space or your partner's bedroom, like, especially, like, if you are interested in, like, reaching a new outcome in your play or, like, in your work or in your therapy, like, it can get messy and it can bring up a lot of things. Yeah, absolutely. Right, as, like, a lot of, like you said, like, all of these different spaces can bring that up, and if you're working or you're playing or you're in a relationship with someone who is attuned to you, then they will know when something has taken a turn, and they will stop, and there will be repair. And that's actually where, like, the juiciest healing can happen, is exactly when something crosses
almost crosses something, and not like a boundary cross, but just like getting into a trigger perhaps, right? Where, and you're able to say, again, also you're, as a survivor, getting to have the experience of saying your safe word, which is the word that you use when you need to be done, right?
And that's the like question that I always start sessions with is like, do you feel comfortable saying no? And like making, like having that be like the first question beforehand, because like not everyone does, and that's something that as a provider that I want to know and will like pursue a little bit differently, but also then like encouraging folks to speak up, being like we're now entering like in this, like you can negotiate beforehand, but also like I oftentimes will begin scenes with being like I would like if something like isn't going right, like please say something so that like we can have an opportunity to guide it.
Yes.
So there's like the attunement, like I think assuming that your dom or your therapist is perfectly attuned can also be a mistake. And like feeling really empowered to speak up when something maybe isn't going quite the direction that you want. Either can be really healing. Yeah.
No, absolutely. This and this goes back to the like getting to have a new experience.
Yeah.
Right. And like
that can be a new experience.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's just such a container. And that's not, so it's like the safe word makes it safe. You have a word that gets you out, and I love your practice of making sure that people actually feel empowered to use it, or checking in if they even feel like they can. So getting to say no or stop, right? Getting to choose what happens to you.
A bad scene that ends can be
Yeah.
cathartic in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Like the proper processing.
And that's the aftercare,
Yeah.
right? Is that when you get to have that really, really intentional care that I think a lot of us don't get to have in a lot of other situations. How wonderful to be so vulnerable and then be so held, right?
So good.
Yeah.
And I think like something that I'm hearing you talk about is like not about pushing someone's boundaries, but it is oftentimes not like a boundary of like I don't want to do this, but like when it approaches a territory where something becomes difficult for someone is oftentimes in therapy and in a BDSM where like
really nice. I love that.
real work sort of
Yes.
begins to happen. And did you say the path analogy? I don't think.
No, right. So we have been sort of like dancing around talking about neural pathways and neuroplasticity, and
we have been talking about it, just not with language.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Yeah. So to like be very concrete about that, right, is that we always have the opportunity to form a new neural pathway or a new procedural memory, which is just like the way that we do things, the way that we feel about things, which are very impacted by early experiences. So the example that I give is if there's an open field and the first time you walk down it, it creates a little bit of a path. And the next time you go, you walk down that path because it's already there. And it gets more and more worn down, or maybe your parent is dragging you down the path, or your partner is dragging you down the path, or society is, right? And then later, when you want to do something differently, or you're invited to do something differently, you're like, oh God, but the path, it's like,
there's like bramble everywhere. Like, all these things are in the way. Like, why would I do that?
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard work to go down the new path.
It is, and it also, maybe you can speak like on like a somatic and like neural level what's happening, but there is a lot of research about our white noise machine just went off. I mean, I'm fine. That actually might mess up the audio.
Oh, okay.
Does that mean that we're good?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's fine.
So something that I research a lot is flow state, and I think of that as like one way of hacking consciousness. And the thing about flow state is that like you want it to be challenging enough to keep your interest, but not so challenging that you get destabilized, completely destabilized. So I think of hacking consciousness that it can be done for like good or evil, and I think like for evil, it's like when you think about ways of hacking consciousness, I think of like targeted ads and like the way that information is spread into like our social media feed in a way like is like propaganda like.
Yeah.
Or I think of like social engineering to some extent, and I think of the ways that the research around gambling. Like, how do you make a good slot machine? It has to give back to you enough that you keep putting your money into it, but not enough that the casino is losing money. So it has to be challenging enough and the statistics like boil down to like 1/3 of the time you get something. And I think that like that similar concept is what makes for a really good scene, is that it's challenging enough to keep your interest, but not so hard that you have to fail, unless that's what you're into.
Yeah, no, totally. And it also makes me think about getting to have an experience of being strong, right? Yeah. Especially for survivors.
And like moving some of those branches to like move to deviate slightly from the path that you're super comfortable with.
Yeah, totally. And like, so to use sort of like an example, if you push past, if your top or if your bottom or whoever is encouraging you to push past a place where you feel like this is as far as I can go, then you get to have this new experience of being stronger than you thought you were. And if the path is I'm weak, then you're starting this path of I'm strong. Right? And that gets to that is something that I think it's definitely fostered in kink. Or if it's I'm unsafe, if that's the path, then it's I can experience safety. Not to say, safe all the time, but
too, there's like that opportunity too of like as it becomes challenging to be like, no, like I actually don't want to go there, is also like potentially like, especially for like so many femme folks, like moving a branch from like a different path of like but like society is sort of like
right, from societal trauma as well, absolutely. And
that's something that I think about a lot, is like BDSM as a space to like power dynamics and power structures are so abusive in our society and in so many societies that like this is like inherent. It's like very traumatic to exist in the capitalist world.
100%.
For so many different people. And
that makes me think about something that you said about how therapy can be inaccessible, right? But that like kink, what you said about like communities caring for each other, I think really goes here, right?
Yeah, and so I think like I think a lot about the psychological language that I do have to describe some of the things that we're doing in the BDSM community. As well as therapy is often inaccessible to people, like paying a sex worker is often inaccessible to people, and a lot of BDSM practices sort of developed as a way to like care for community outside of these oftentimes really inaccessible care structures.
Yeah, right.
That, like,
exactly.
Especially like weren't made to like hold queer people or like the complexities of queer people's lives.
Yeah, right. So you think about how a somatic session with a therapist or a body worker can be really inaccessible, but you and your partners, even you with yourself in certain ways, like can facilitate these somatic healing experiences. And that can be said with a lot of things, right? It can be like self-massage, or it can be something more kink related, but we really can facilitate these somatic healing experiences that open new pathways with ourselves.
Totally. Yeah. And so I think something that comes up in kink community, I know that I was at the Alt-Sex conference, which is a really interesting conference if you're interested in the intersection of BDSM and psychology, and which is also really cool because there's a bunch of DOMs in the audience and like lifestyle folks, and someone asked the question about with like BDSM and trauma and having a client who wanted the same exact session for like 20 years. And just like every dom that they saw, they wanted the same exact corporal caning session. This is the role play, this is a script. And the dom was wondering, like, since it had to do with like childhood history, am I replaying this person's trauma? And we engaged in this really interesting conversation about this, and like the conclusion that we sort of came to like together in community is like, if the person keeps coming back and showing up, even if it looks the same to you from the outside, like they're still showing up, they're still getting something out of it. And like, it doesn't need to be this huge, like mind-blowing transformation for someone to be getting something out of it. Like, just having like a regular practice oftentimes is really stabilizing.
Totally.
For people.
Yeah, and that makes me think also with neural pathways, which is that if you've been taught something, right, I'm not loved for 30 years of your life, you may need, and like for those early 24 years your brain is still developing, you may need 30 years to learn something different. And so having the same consistent experience, that attachment repair takes a lot of years.
And maybe like the 1,000th session, something shifts and is like mind-blowing. Or maybe it doesn't and they're stabilized.
Exactly.
Process. And
absolutely. It is slow work, right? And that is because you're undoing these really, really formative years, and so it just takes a lot of time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And, like, I think, I don't know, it makes me feel good knowing that, like, there's, like, the idea of hacking our autonomic nervous system in ways that is often just, like, we don't have any control over. And that's, like, with the overlap, like, when I first became really interested in these overlaps was when I was doing my yoga teacher training and, like, learning about these from a yogic perspective. And I was like, wow, like, these postures that they're putting you into, like, think about, like, submission and devotion. Just, like, I've done this before. Like, this feels really similar. Or, like, the idea of, like, surrendering on a therapist's couch. And even, like, we were talking about EDMR. And, like, some of the things that I was explaining that I do in session, you're like, oh, like, they do that in EDMR. And I'm like, totally. I have no idea. And so I think, like, there's so many different paths to these practices and these tools that we come to from so many different ways. And, like, by siloing ourselves off, I think we're really losing an opportunity to, like, talk about, like, what we're doing the same. And, like,
yes, absolutely. And that goes back to what someone just said, which is, what do you do if your therapist thinks that all kink is reliving your trauma and not healing the nervous system, which is, a lot of people are really misinformed about this, right? And this connection that, like, we're bringing is really new and is, a lot of people are really misinformed about. And you can provide practitioners with articles and books and information, but you also deserve to have a therapist.
They don't have to explain. I know I spent so much time in therapy explaining what BDSM was.
Yeah, very frustrating.
And especially, like, when I do that professionally at, like, hospitals. It can be really frustrating. So I think, like you deserve a practitioner who understands your life. And, like, also why, like, I'm so excited to connect with, like, folks like Andrea, because, like, you are a provider that offers that. And I think that people shouldn't have to explain the realities of their life to a provider. And that it's a provider's, like, due diligence to, like, offer services to the community that they're providing them for. Like, if you're going to provide services to a community, you should not make them explain their life to you.
And it's really hard to find people who are educated in this, especially if you live not in a city or just in general. Like, there are a limited amount. And so if you do feel like, I do want to stick it out with this therapist because they take my insurance or the availability works.
That's totally valid.
And you can send them a list of things to read, and they can read it on their own time and not use your time to be educated. And if they don't feel willing to do that, then I don't actually recommend seeing them anymore.
I think that's a really good point. Just, like, throwing it out there, Manhattan Alternative is also a really great resource for finding kink-friendly therapists that you shouldn't have to explain a lot of these things to.
Totally. In New York, and then outside of New York, you just going in with the consciousness of interviewing your therapist.
So, like, interview both ways. Which I think people often forget because it's so, and also just, like, it's so fucking hard to find a therapist. There are so many, like, health, there's a recent article, like, health insurance companies will, like, spoof fake. Did you see this?
No.
Like, if you're looking for, like, in-network providers, like, oftentimes 80% of them are just fake numbers that, like, go to, like, a Costco. There was, like, a study of this that was done. So it's, like, it's really fucking hard. One thing that I will say, like, I've been a care coordinator, or I was a care coordinator for a health nonprofit for a few years, and, like, I would, like, it's less traumatic for me interacting with healthcare when I do it in the third person. When I was looking for a therapist, I would just, like, call and pretend to be, like, hi, like, this is so-and-so, I'm, like, and I would just be like, I'm calling on behalf of my client. Blunt. And, like, it just made it a lot easier, or, like, working with a friend to sort of, like, doula that process with each other.
That.
It's so hard.
It is really hard. No, totally, like, asking for support, or I love, like, taking on a, like, case manager persona. That's amazing.
I was role-playing.
Exactly. I was gonna say, that's a super hot role-play. Totally.
That was a little healthcare tangent, but I think it's an important part of the conversation.
No, totally. I also want to touch on, I think this is something that a question that someone sent me before this, which is linking impact play to healing the nervous system, and that, so what Peter Levine in Somatic Experiencing calls the felt sense is this sort of, like, internal experience. So it can be, like, a warmth in your body, like when someone that you love walks in the room. It can be your, like, skin buzzing with excitement. It can be your stomach dropping to the floor. So it's the felt sense. So the thing that really gets encouraged to be expressed in kink is the felt sense, because you're always checking in with the person who is you're playing with about what's happening for them or for yourself internally.
And something that I've been doing a lot more in my sessions is having folks articulate what they're feeling during it, which I think is like a really difficult thing to do, and especially for folks who like come to me like who are like, I feel like really disembodied, and like I'm looking for this practice like for like as a form of self-care and to like get back in touch with my body. And I think because of how much I talk about yoga, oftentimes like people who are interested in that find me, and like it can be like a really fucking torturous thing to do. So like, how does that make you feel?
Yes, you're like,
does that make you feel like a little bitch?
Yeah. The felt sense of a little bitch.
But it can also be like a grounding technique. So like for me, like eroticizing the language around that oftentimes will like keep people in their body more. So like, how does it feel when I run my fingers down your neck? Or like, what does it make you feel like when like you see me dressed in all leather? And I think it's like it becomes overwhelming, but not overwhelming enough to go, like it can become that, but like finding that balance of like articulating the experience becomes really powerful and like sort of like bridging the gap. And I just think like we're often so disconnected of like what's up here and like what's in the body. And I know for myself, like I'm someone who's like, I want to read like 9 textbooks on this, and like it's like much scarier for me to like pursue things in my body. So I think like any practice that sort of like bridges language with touch.
It's also bottom up processing, right? And so in our neural networks, 80% of our neural networks are body to brain and 20% are brain to body. And so if we really want to listen to what's happening inside, we actually have to prioritize the body and still listen to the cognition as well, obviously, right? But when we say like, what happens inside of you when I blank, we're connecting to that 80% of us.
And it's so like, it's oftentimes we don't know.
Right, we're so disembodied.
And we were talking about this earlier too, and I think we can move into our chapter on attunement. But like, oftentimes I'll say like, I think the most healing part of my practice is that I make people put their fucking phone away for an hour and like work with me.
Oh my God, literally same.
And, right? And, like, that's another thing that we have in common. Is like, how often are you like truly present with someone that you're interacting with? And when eye contact is such a big part of this. We were talking about, I believe her name is Victoria Beebe, who researches mother-baby attachment styles. And I was at this somatic psychotherapy conference at Columbia 2 years ago, and they showed some of that, and they like slowed down the mother-baby eye contact to like milliseconds, and it takes like 2 minutes to show like a 3-second interaction. And, like, they're pointing out the different types of, like, where the eyes are going. And I think that there's something that's so powerful about being seen and, like, creating...
Beatrice, Phoebe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Give us some for credit.
Beatrice, Phoebe. I think that there's something so powerful about attuning with someone. And I think about that in my practice so much. Like, I know that... I would feel in sessions with someone as a top or as a dom, like sometimes there's so much that's going on in my body as I'm like processing and holding these things and like guiding an individual on a particular experience. And like I would notice myself, I'm like, whoa, like I feel really weird, like I feel nervous and like uncomfortable and nauseous and like I'm sweating and like what is this? And like I through my own practice, I realized I was like, oh, like I'm beginning to attune to like what this person is feeling because like we're so in sync and slowed down and not able to remember the word for it. Oh, and I was talking to a psychology friend and she was like, oh, that's like psychosomatic countertransference. And I'm like, oh, bitch, there's language for this? Like I was like, I had literally no idea what's going on in my body. And like being able to find language for that helped me as a top and as a dom begin to like harness it so that it was under control.
Yes, totally, right. And I love that someone is highlighting that attunement can look really different for different folks, like especially folks who have autism, like eye contact is not always safe or can be extremely unsafe. So thank you for bringing up that point. But that attunement can look different for everybody, right? So there's like a lot of clients who are being looked at whether they, like for whatever is happening for them, where being looked at can feel unsafe. That can also be just like a survivor thing where like being noticed is unsafe. Yeah. And so the attunement might be to not look at the person, and that it can, attunement is knowing what the person needs or being able to ask for what the person needs. It's not about following like a set thing of like, oh, I'm going to
do X, Y, and Z.
X, Y, and Z to connect, right? Like, and
you
that's
can never write a recipe for a good scene or for like a good therapy session.
Exactly.
It's so much about what both the provider in professional settings are bringing as well as the client, or like what partner and partner are bringing. Yeah, and a lot of the conversation about what attunement is can be very like Western as well. Yeah. And so just to say that like attunement really does look like different things for everybody, but it is just that sense of like being on the same page or being understood by someone. Yeah. And it was Beatrice BB, right? Yes. Okay. BB. Beatrice BB. Like watching the videos of mothers attuned to infants, there's just like, whoa, like that's what I'm like, that's what a good scene looks like. It's like when like, and like it's like the baby is responding to the mother, and the mother is responding to the baby, and it's this reciprocity that we were like beginning off talking about. Like it's not just one person receiving and someone like giving and giving and giving. Like it's not just like beating like an unresponsive. Yeah. Right, and knowing that the noise that your partner made is a noise of pleasure pain and not pain. Right? And being able to be attuned to that, or like being able to, if someone's like, no, I'm okay, being like, that's your kind of like not okay voice. Like, let's just take a second. Like, the person you're playing with, both like top and or bottom, like has to be hyper attuned to you. You have to be in hyper attunement for it to work. Yeah, and I think of one experience that I had when I was playing with someone who wanted intense pain, and I was playing around with it, and I wasn't really receiving how they were responding. And so like after giving them one hard one, I went to go check in, and I was just like, you would have let me go would you have let me go as harder than that, and even though it's too hard? And they were like, yes. Yep. And then I've had another experience of, I was actually live streaming play before Instagram got even more fascist. Yeah. And my submissive isn't super verbal, and so watching it on a live stream was very different than like watching like more performative like vocal BDSM porn. Yeah, because it was much more subtly attuned, and she was actually a little bit upset that people were like, why, like they're like, I wouldn't be here if like I wasn't enjoying it. And I think that oftentimes like the attunement can be so subtle, like some people. And then after talking about that, I had, like, my DMs were flooded by people who are more quiet in Subspace. And they're like, I never see people who are experiencing Subspace in the same way that I do. Yeah. And I think, like, it is more difficult to read, but just, like, constantly checking in and, like, getting that flow and, like, finding that, like, juicy space of when you're like, yes, like, this is good. Totally, yeah. And someone asked, how does one get to hyper-attunement? And I think that really is childhood trauma. Yeah, right. But with someone in a safe way. How do you get to hyper-attunement in a safe way? Hyper-vigilance. Right. Yeah. No. Totally. Yeah. That too. Right. But I mean, that's the safety that we're talking about. Is especially if you're a trauma survivor and you're wanting to play with some of these things, like having many conversations, playing more lightly before going too deep with someone, not too deep, but going deeply with someone, right? Like really making sure that everybody's on the same page, and that is what creates that safe container, right? And just like with the therapy session, like I wouldn't ever just be like all of a sudden doing somatic work. Like I would frame it, we would talk about it. How can I bring you back if this goes deep in a way that doesn't feel helpful, right? So you just make sure that that you know the other person's nervous system, you know the other person's triggers, you know what, again, like a happy noise or a bad noise sounds like. And I think something I definitely learned from my therapist friends are like how helpful the frame is to stopping things from going badly. I think like in play, there's often less of a frame, especially like with sex work, of like having like this just take place in this space. So I've definitely like learned a lot of language around like a lot of conversations that therapists will have with their clients are like questions that I'll like have started more recently bringing into my like negotiations around
that's
play
wonderful.
because I think a frame does really help.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And right, so if you're doing like one-off play, whether it's with a professional or with like someone that you're meeting at a party, right, like you can still do that. Like you can say like, hey, just so you know, these are my triggers. Like if I go silent, that's a good thing.
Right.
If I go silent, that's a bad thing. Like it is also about getting to know yourself and knowing your nervous system. And so in the polyvagal theory in therapy, which is one of my favorite books, there's all these charts in the back where you can chart your nervous system. And like
awesome.
you could bring one of those to your pro-dom or to your like play partner and be like, here's my nervous system. Like here's how you know if I'm here. Here's how you know if I'm gone. Like that's okay.
Right.
Like just getting to know what does low tone safe dorsal look like for you, and what does I'm not here anymore in a bad way dorsal look like.
Okay, so we didn't talk about this today, but I don't know if maybe you want to have this conversation about the difference between disassociation and subspace.
Yes.
Which is
exactly
because people always ask me this, and like I have a really hard time expressing it because subspace and disassociation. Subspace can look so different in different people, and disassociation can look so different in different people. And a lot of what I've found about the differences, like in being able to see it in someone else, is through somatic countertransference. It's like
how you feel,
how I feel,
yes.
And so like if as a top, when I'm playing with someone, if I start to feel myself losing that connection, or if I start to feel myself like feeling uncomfortable or weird or like tingles in like not a good way, I always check in because I'm like, if I've lost that attunement and that connection, because and like usually it's like a pretty helpful tool for me, but I don't even like really have the language to know. Like I've been trying to write about this, and like I'm just like it's a practice because it can look so similar. There can be like in subspace like your breath can slow down, you can become less responsive and still like feel safe. And just be like totally like warm goo. And that can also look very, very similar to a trauma trigger response.
And that's connecting with the felt sense, and I love that you highlight that it's also the felt sense of the top, not just the bottom, right? So if you as a top are feeling like I'm kind of checking out, or I'm feeling like I'm not here, absolutely.
And then feel that as like a therapist.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. When I'm more attuned to people's hyper arousal than their hypo arousal, because if they're up here, I meet them there. Although honestly, if people are hypo, like
that's much harder for me. So that's
so funny. Oh my god. See, everybody's different. Everybody's nervous systems are different. Yeah, no, if people are hyper, I'm like right there with them, and I have to like I'll make a lot of really loud breathing noises.
Okay.
No, totally. I'll just be like and stop talking and just breathe. It's the same thing you could do.
That's what I do in a session. I'm like,
there you go.
We're gonna breathe now.
We're gonna breathe. Yeah, totally. But so like if subspace, again, this is like doing your nervous system chart, and I love what someone said about like bring your yes, no, maybe list and your nervous system chart to a date. Just be like a little packet. And they can even be charted together. I'm like having so many ideas. But if subspace for you is warm goo and dissociation is a cold shower, then like it's so important to know that, and that takes time of just getting to know yourself, right? Or like if safe sympathetic arousal, so like a safe like activation of stress hormones, is feeling like your skin is buzzing, and unsafe is your heart is racing and you feel like you're gonna have a panic attack, right? Then it's important that you know that, and that your partner or whoever you're playing with knows that. Which also reminds me, something else that I wanted to touch on, because we talked about subspace and dissociation, is that also getting more hyper aroused in a scene can help us complete a stress response cycle that has gone unresolved. So
it's like flush cortisol. It's like
exactly
in the body.
Exactly. Yes.
Out. You have to trigger something in the autonomic nervous system to then like flush it.
Yeah, right. And so if you are like pushing to that place, getting to your edge, and then the pain or the play or whatever stops, and then you feel that like rush over you, right? Like that is your body again, like flushing out those stress hormones. And so
I think that also feels so related to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, of like that's part of the process that carves new neural pathways.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Right, you're getting a new experience. You're
getting
to
have that flush of cortisol, and you're able to release it.
Yeah,
you're able to like get it out of your body, like, and like you'll see this in like animals. I think about a lot, like after a traumatic experience with animals, you'll see them like literally like doing somatic exercises to like, and what they're doing is they're flushing cortisol from their body, so it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick in them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and because we live in a lot of us live. Right, exactly. And the world doesn't invite us to be able to have those activation and settling cycles. And in like pre-capitalism and pre-colonialism, there were way more practices of getting to cycle through activation and settling on a daily basis. And we've removed those from our lives. So we have to find new ways of doing it. It can be a lot of different things, but kink can be a really beautiful way to create that.
And this is where my interest in ritual comes in, is because like we don't have those practices so much in our society. That there's something about the ritual, and any ritual, like the beginning, middle, and end stage, that holds a container for us to experience this in a way that isn't completely overwhelming or completely like occupying of everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it's very powerful stuff. There's Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They talk a lot about the stress response cycle, and it's a really fantastic book to help you find ways of doing that, and you can like totally put your own little kinky spin on it, because they don't touch it, but it can be weaved in.
I know, and I think of like all of these practices that have nothing to do with kink, that like are so kinky.
Totally.
If you think about it.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Are there other things you wanted to...
We really hit it.
We did
it all.
Almost exactly an hour.
I know.
Maybe we'll take time for a few questions. If folks have questions and they want to ask them, like we could continue talking about this forever, and like
clearly
we'll have more conversations.
Yes.
We'll take a few minutes to see if any questions come in.
Yeah, I know that folks have already posted them, but I've been trying to keep track. But if you want to post them again, that would be very helpful. I know.
Thanks
so
for
fun.
letting me put language.
You too. It's so fun to see just to see all of the similarities between somatic work and kink. It's so important.
Yeah, and even like I think of like the ritual of therapy too. It's like setting the scene.
Oh,
right. Yes. It's like the negotiation and like finding like the right.
Yeah, I haven't even thought of that, because it's true. It's like I have so many pre-ritual rituals where I like, I'll like light something in the room, and I'll like arrange the pillows in a certain way.
A different scent that I use after sessions to be like, okay, my work here is done.
Oh, that's awesome. I should do
that.
that.
Highly recommend it.
Yes, that's amazing. Yes.
How to find a safe. I would say if you're completely new to the scene and looking for someone to explore with, I would say any practice you can do to get to know yourself better and like get to know what your boundaries are incredibly helpful. And just like going out to meet people. Like when people come to me who are like their first time exploring kink, the first thing that like if it's like a big part of them and they're not just exploring in a one-off session, I encourage people to find community. Because community gives you the opportunity to process your experience, as well as to like sort of like keep your experiences in check. Like if something goes bad, being like, oh, that like maybe that like having an outside person be like, maybe that wasn't what should have happened. I think is sort of like offering a protective component.
Totally, yeah, and like we heal in relationship and we heal in community, and like again, like pre-capitalism, pre-colonialism, there was so much more community, and I think a lot of people feel very isolated and alone because of not having community, and kink can be a really beautiful community to be a part of, along with other ones, right? So,
and I think like not pushing really hard for like some sort of like, we're talking about like a lot of things that can happen, they don't necessarily happen, and I think like pushing really hard for a specific outcome can like go into some more dangerous territory. Because, like I'd always rather end a scene too early than too late.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, totally.
And like I do my best to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked when dissociation is safe, if ever. And I think that kind of goes back to our conversation about Subspace, and I think that it's it is about experiencing that dorsal state, but in a lower tone way. And that can be like after a scene. It can also be like after a really intense movement class or after a big meal. Like we can, if we feeling outside of ourselves can actually be a positive thing if it's in the right context.
And I also think like disassociation has often kept us safe. Like
wonderful. Yes.
The reasons why we've learned to disassociate is because it's a coping mechanism, and your like body is doing the best that it can to take care of itself. And I think like thinking about that and honoring that as like beautiful part of like why you or like we may disassociate, and like bringing awareness to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I'd say like yes, disassociation can be safe in that it can protect you.
Right. And it's also about the flexibility of being able to move between states. And so if you're able... Yeah, exactly right. So if you're able to like, I'm going to dissociate for this like train ride, or I'm going to dissociate for this like family dinner because it's going to keep me safe. And then but being able to come back inside your body quickly after, that would be my hope for that person, is that if it's a survival strategy, that it's one that they're able to move in and out of and be more flexible with, instead of like, okay, I had to dissociate to get through that family dinner and I haven't come home to myself years later, right?
And then I think too, that's like where ritual can really like come into it. Like I know if I'm going into like, I like had this soap that I called my magical boundary soap that I would use after session, and there was like one particular person that I was working with where I was like, oh, magical boundary soap, and like it wasn't until like doing that ritual very aggressively that I was like, oh, like this person is affecting me in a way that like I actually don't feel comfortable with working with them, and so then like that ritual gave me like the ability and the time to check in with myself to like end that relationship. And I think like whereas if I didn't necessarily have that ritual, it might have been something like I disassociated.
Ritual can be so protective in that way. I love
and
that.
like a way to like just check in with yourself. Like if you do this, and like I think this with my yoga practice, like having like the same yoga practice every morning as a chronically ill person for me like enables me to be like, wow, like I can't do those like 5 really simple postures today. I should probably cancel all my appointments today. And like being, or like I haven't been able to do my yoga practice in a week. So like what is that? What does that mean? And so just having like
things in place.
It like creates a container, it's a ritual, and it provides me with so much data about my life. And like I think of this as like we're gathering data about our bodies, and like what does this do? What does that do? What does it feel like when I say this?
I love that too, because so that also goes back to being curious and being mindful, right? So instead of like you being like, oh, I can't do those postures, like, oh God, I'm so whatever, like, and assigning all this really like deep meaning to it, you're like, okay, that's good information about my body today. Like to not assign a deeper meaning about like I'm broken or there's something wrong with me, like it's all information. And that if we can have a mindful practice of coming back into ourselves after seeing a client, that takes a lot of us, right? Like it is about just being mindful, being present after like needing to leave for a while. I think it's just like a helpful tool in general. Absolutely. Are there any other questions before we I actually think a lot about chronic illness and healing. My path to finding BDSM was actually at the same time that I was diagnosed with like myriad of chronic illnesses when I was 18, and the ability to like pursue pain outside of like the Western medical industrial complex and like to like then like facilitate experiences of pain for people was incredibly transformative and healing for me. So like that in and of itself, being like, this is when I choose to inflict or feel pain, was like incredibly empowering of me, of like not having this like, oh, like I'm just sick all the time narrative. Right, I mean that's a new pathway, right?
It's like, oh, this is different